An important part of the economic policies and management topic is to be able to evaluate whether economic policies have been effective at achieving their goals. So this is topic 4 of the HSC Economics course. We're going to have a look at some steps to answer a question like this one. This could be a HSC or a trial extended response question that asks to evaluate the effectiveness of Australia's monetary policy to achieve sustainable growth and price stability. Monetary policy could be swapped out for fiscal or micro policy or labour market policies, and the goals could be changed as well, varied by the question and the policies that it's asking for. So first, in order to evaluate the policy, you need to look at some relevant measurements. If you're a goalkeeper, what's going to be relevant to assess your performance is how many shots have been had at you, how many you've saved. It doesn't really matter how many goals you've scored because that's not part of your job. That's going to be a less relevant measurement to assess your performance. For the Reserve Bank, the main goal that you'd be looking to assess and evaluate monetary policy is how well they have kept inflation between 2 to 3% on average over time, being that is their stated goal. For fiscal policy, their main goal is to smooth out the business cycle, and they can do that by influencing the level of economic activity. So to actually evaluate means to make a judgment using criteria. Criteria are the actual numbers, the statistics, the figures that you're going to use to measure their performance, and then make your judgment based on those measurements. So firstly, you need to look at what are their goals, like we've just mentioned. What is the stated goal of the economic policy? How do they measure the goal? And then implementation. How was the policy implemented? If we stick with that example of monetary policy, that's going to be through domestic market operations and adjusting the level of the cash rate. And then this is really important. What external factors outside of their control, such as some global influences, have also had an impact on the outcomes, and how have they dealt with those outside influences? So for monetary policy, this could be the impact of the global financial crisis and having to cut the cash rate to counter some factors that are not within the domestic economy. Then lastly, outcomes. Did the policy achieve its goals? Compare the outcome to the target. How did they go? And then you make your overall judgment. Yes, they've been effective at achieving their goals, or no, they haven't been effective. So in order to make that judgment, these are some of the numbers that you might look at on the graph here, like unemployment, inflation, GDP growth, and the current account deficit. Overall, you're probably going to say that for macroeconomic policy that we have been effective to some extent because we've had the longest run of unbroken growth in the world. We've had generally low unemployment and low inflation for quite some time now. The next thing to consider is our development. If that's relevant to the goals of the policy that you're looking at, not only our growth, but our development, this can be measured by the Human Development Index. So factoring in 3 different parts, health, education, and income, putting that together to make the index. In Australia, we rank 6th with a Human Development Index of 0.938. So again, we must be doing something right through our policy. We also need to consider the limitations that are specific to that policy. The syllabus tells us that these are time lags, political constraints, and global influences, and these will vary whether you're looking at fiscal, monetary, or micro, as shown in the table here, which just involves time lags. Then an extension point to improve your response would be to think of what are some other challenges or other considerations for that type of policy that could impact its effectiveness. For monetary policy, at the moment, this could include that we are at record low interest rates. With the cash rate at 0.25%, the RBA has no rounds left in the chamber. They're out of ammunition. There isn't room for further cuts to the cash rate, even if they wanted to. The second part or second challenge could be high household and business debt. If these households and businesses already have borrowed too much money, they won't have the capacity to borrow more money, even if the RBA did cut cash rate or interest rates further. And then lastly, very similar kind of challenge, that there is low consumer and investor confidence within the economy. Even with low interest rates, who wants to make that decision to borrow more money and increase their level of debt? This is a good graph to show the performance of monetary policy, looking at Australia's inflation and unemployment on the one graph, especially going back to before introducing the inflation target. And this is an excellent quote from a speech from Guy Debelle from April 2018 that you would be wise to look up. He states that in the 25 years since inflation targeting was implemented, the annual rate of inflation has averaged 2.5%. So their goal is between 2 to 3%. So they've had it right in that Goldilocks zone in the middle there. There has been spikes above and below this, but on average over the long run, they've kept inflation within the target. So that is going to help you to answer this question, whether it's evaluate, assess, or analyze the effectiveness of some kind of policy, economic policy, to achieve goals. So these can be swapped out, like I've said, for different questions, but some of these steps and considerations will be the same to answer that kind of question. Thanks for watching.